Should women's be women apostrophe S on a pair of socks? Is that correct grammar?
I think so. Yeah, is that what it is? I can't see.
Yeah, it's apostrophe S.
Yeah, women's socks. Because it's a plural noun. Anyway, whatever. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. This is a podcast where two exes, that's me, Josh, and Sean, talk about many things. I don't want to give a list because I don't want to limit us in our discussion because it does encompass many, many different things that are going on in our lives and around the world.
Well, you can say including and then list some things. So it's not exclusively those things, but it includes those things.
Well, I'm open to anything, so I don't want to limit the discussion. Anyway, I'm Josh, and the other host is Sean.
People have always said that about you. Very open-minded individual.
What are you implying?
I'm not implying anything. I'm saying you're open-minded.
You're implying that people have said I'm closed-minded.
No.
Apologies, by the way. I have a cold, so I'm sort of a bit sniffly, and I'm sipping a Lemsip.
What's the active ingredient in a Lemsip? How does it?
It's paracetamol and it's a decongestant. I can't remember which one. It's not like the pseudoephedrine ones, which make you go a bit speedy, but it's the other one. Phenyl, I don't know.
Okay. Do you think that Lemsip is more of a placebo thing or it actually physically does something?
No, it does something for sure, like the decongestant and the paracetamol. Paracetamol, how do you say it?
Well, I don't know because I get confused. In Australia, I think we say paracetamol.
Maybe.
But paracetamol, I don't know.
Paracetamol. I don't know. They definitely do something, that and the decongestant. And some of them, I don't know if this one has, but some of them have vitamin C in which, anyway,
okay.
that's a whole rabbit hole that we could go down. But
and I'm always playing with something off screen while we're doing our podcast, and I'm always dropping things or fumbling with things.
You're always stimming. So
I've got this little gel thing, and it's got like a texture on it. It's a rough texture.
Okay.
And so I've got that to play with. So if you see my hands moving, it's me playing with that. And have you got snow there today? The forecast said it was going to snow today.
Yeah, I read that, but I think it's too warm to snow. It's about, well, I say warm. It's about 4 degrees, I think. I don't know, actually. I haven't been outside today. I've decided to spend the day in bed. Well, apart from this podcast. It says at 3 degrees feels like -7.
What does that mean?
I don't know, maybe because of the wind.
Yeah, it's extremely windy here. And because I live in an old building that the wind gets in through all the cracks, and there are certain parts of my tiny flat where the wind comes in. I mean, really comes through like a wind tunnel. So I have to keep doors shut between rooms, or otherwise I feel the wind. But enough about the weather, even though it's very on brand for us to complain about the weather. Another thing that we need to discuss with varying range of emotions, I'm sure, is the finale of Stranger Things, because I finally got around to watching it.
Yes, I've been waiting for you to catch up. Where do you want to start?
Well, my initial reaction is that it was okay, and I think that in the all-time rankings of incredible TV shows, it's not even in the top 10. I think that it was enjoyable in parts. Like I really love all of the action sequences and the monsters and people fighting. I especially like when they show people like, is it Nancy, like fighting back?
Mm-hmm.
But that's about where it ends for me about what's enjoyable. And the obviously the nostalgia part of it is it speaks to me as well as being a child of a certain era. But how about you? What are your initial reactions?
Well, yeah, I would agree with a lot of what you said, but I would add that I think it brought incredible special effects to the small screen. I don't remember a TV show which used special effects to such great advantage, or what's the word? It really, really hinged on incredible special effects, and it did it so well that for me made it one of the sort of standout TV shows of my lifetime. But yeah, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't brilliant. It had a lot of faults in it. I don't know. It's very easy for us to sit here and criticize it. I don't know what else or how else they could have tied it all up in a finale, though.
I think the storyline was fine. It is what it is. It could have been anything. It could have been that 11 survived. It could have been whatever.
Well, I think she did, but
I don't think she did.
I think she did.
No, I don't think she did, or I don't think we're meant to know. I think it's fine that we're not meant to know, and you just make up your own mind. So maybe for the little kids watching it, having that storyline at the end, spoiler alert, obviously, for anybody listening to this who hasn't seen the finale.
Yeah, stop now if you haven't watched it.
I think it was a clever way of lessening the burden of having her die or even not know by having Mike explain how he thinks she survived or might have survived in a fantasy scenario. And I think that made it easy because there were so many young viewers of the show. I think that was a device that the filmmakers did, or the TV producers, directors did, to try and soften the blow of what was quite an emotional ending.
But like the takeaway for me at the end was the way we get through life, because all TV shows, all films that we watch, they are metaphors for our own lives. And the takeaway at the end of it was that life isn't necessarily the events that happen to you, it's the story that you tell yourself, which is essentially what Mike said at the end.
Like, you want to talk about the special effects being good? That wig that Joe Keery, who plays the character Steve, was wearing in the flash forward scene when they're on the rooftop, the 4 older kids who are now adults, that wig he was wearing was diabolical. That was the fucking upside down. Like, that was just nonsense. I don't know.
Steve the Hare Harrington.
Yeah, it was so hideous. Also, the way they make up some of those young people, they look so haggard. They looked like they were like 80 years old. They could have been the Demogorgons, like they looked so rough. And I think they did it deliberately, but I'm not sure why they had to make them so ugly.
I thought that the scene where Vecna has Will, wrapped up in the cocoon thing and had his hand on over his head like that, I thought that was very like thinly veiled coding for sexual assault. And I thought that the language Vecna was using, like the more you resist, the more it's going to hurt and stuff like that, I thought it was very much intended to be interpreted as a sexual assault for older audiences. And there are so many different lenses you could look at the show through. But the other thing I thought was quite moving was, that's not me getting upset, that's just my cold. But the other thing I thought was quite moving was that, again, it was coded but not explicit, was when Will was talking about, and I know you have issues with Noah, the actor, but the way Will was talking about the things that Vecna had showed him and thinking about the era in which this was set. I mean, they didn't mention AIDS or HIV at all, of course, but it's impossible to ignore the fact that this was set in the US in the 1980s. And that was the dead center of the AIDS epidemic in the US. And
I think both of those things are legitimate readings of the piece of media. I don't know if the show was created from that angle, but I think that's a legitimate reading to take from it. I don't know if that was the intention of the showrunners or the showmakers. I don't know, because a lot of the show seemed a lot more basic than that to me. It didn't seem to have a lot of depth, but I'm open to reading interpretations. What I thought was like unenjoyable was the coming out part of it in that episode where Will came out to everybody, and for some reason he had to muster everybody around, including what's his name who drove the truck, and got everybody around except, bizarrely, David Harbour wasn't there. He was somewhere in the Pussy Palace or something, and he came out, and they tried to turn it into, after 5 seasons, this somehow was one of the pivotal storylines of the arc of the show. And to me, it didn't feel like it was ever through the show. It seemed so secondary. And then they had this big, huge moment where somehow they were going to defeat this evil by him being honest about his sexuality. And it felt very forced to me.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And like my two nieces, who are maybe more of the target audience of Stranger Things, I don't know, they're, what are they, 16 and 13 or something? I think 13, 16. Yeah, they didn't like the coming out scene either. I don't know. It's so hard for, I think, a team of writers working with such pressure to make it an epic finale. There would have been so many competing demands on them from Netflix, from the producers, the writers, everyone. I I can see the flaws in it, but I don't know how else they would have necessarily
Well,
done that.
he could have come out, but it didn't have to be framed as like even almost as important as what 11 was going through. Like they've almost framed it like that whole 11 storyline with her sister Carly and all of that, and how she realized she had to. That will thing was almost up on that level, and I was like, but this didn't mean anything through the show.
Well,
This didn't.
I think it was always hinted at, especially
Yes,
in the first
yeah,
and second season.
but it just seemed like not even a secondary storyline. It just seemed like, like Steve learning to be friends with Dustin, or I don't know.
I feel like a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of the characters had that catharsis in the final season or the last 5 episodes or whatever, where they had to sort of they had to have some sort of self-realization in order to gain agency and power. And Will was a very exaggerated case of that, where he suddenly gained, powers or whatever. But I feel like all of the characters, the Nancy and what's Will's brother called?
Don't know.
The one that Nancy was dating.
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Nancy and Jonathan deciding that actually they didn't work as a couple, even though they loved each other, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I felt like all of the characters to some extent had to come to that realization, but Will's was.
Yeah, I just felt it was. Yeah, it was a little weak. But also the funny bit I discussed with you yesterday about Hopper getting at the end of the show getting a job offer to be the police chief in Montauk, and what's Easter egg, and a lot of super fans of the show will know that there's a conspiracy theory called the Montauk Project, which was people think that in Montauk, which is where in
it's upstate. Is it? No, it's on the very, very tip of Long Island in New York State.
Oh, is it? And there's a conspiracy theory that started around the 80s where the similar sorts of experiments by the government were happening to like mental warfare and stuff. And apparently that was the inspiration for Stranger Things, for the people to write the story. And so that was a tie-in of like a nod to that he was going there. But then also interestingly, on the Lily Allen album where she's telling this story that's inspired by her relationship with David Harbour, the actor, that he bought a handbag for someone and took her to Montauk for the weekend. And I found that so fascinating that she somehow, whether deliberately or not, worked that little Easter egg into her album. And then when that show came out, when he said that word Montauk, I was like, that was the most exciting thing to me on that episode. Like I nearly fell off my chair. Like it was so exciting.
I mean, I completely missed that Easter egg, even though I've been listening to the Lily Allen album like on repeat over the last few days. Until you mentioned it yesterday on the phone to me, I hadn't even clicked. But what about the music? I really loved the use of the 2 Prince songs in the finale. I thought that was lovely.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, to me, I'm a huge Prince fan, so it's not about not liking the music, but I think it can maybe just seem a little bit obvious to use these iconic anthemic tracks. See, the Kate Bush song was a little bit more left of center, I thought, and really revitalized something that has been ignored or unknown by a whole multiple generations of young people. Whereas the Prince song, I mean, that first chord of Purple Rain, I think that must be the only song in the world that you could tell what it is from that, or one of the only songs you can tell from that first chord, and that's all you heard, you'd know that it's that song. So I don't know, it's not, it was a little obvious, those songs. I just felt it was a little bit heavy-handed.
Did you and Hill cry in the finale?
No.
Oh, okay.
There was zero emotional anything for me. Like when Will was coming out, having that scene, we were hollering at the screen going, fucking hurry up. Like we were swearing and using slurs at the screen.
I cried multiple times in the last few episodes, but that's just me. I'm very prone to.
Oh, the bit where I got a little bit like, but didn't cry was this. Anytime there was a storyline between Dustin and Steve, to me that felt like the most emotionally relevant or charged storyline, because and I actually think that Steve Harrington was the most likable character out of that show across all of the seasons. I felt like he had the most growth. I
felt like Nancy was for me.
Yeah, she was also likable, but Steve was like, you know, when Robin came out to him, he was cool about it, even though he was like a jock, and he was, you know, he looked after the kids. In the end, he got a job looking after the kids, because when that what's his name? Derek hugged him. He kind of had a bit of a delightful Derek. He had a bit of a epiphany where he was like, oh, this means something to these kids when I help them. And I liked that. I thought it was really nice. But one thing I didn't like about the show, and I didn't think it was necessary, was the gun violence was so explicit. And I found that quite troubling. And just to pivot a little bit, like especially in light of what...
Hang on. I think I know where you're going with this. But before you do that, I just want to quickly say, when you talked about who was the most likable character, up until this season, I liked Robin, even though she only came in season 3.
Oh, yeah.
But this season, I don't know what happened. Like the writers took her in a completely different direction. And in the last half hour of the finale, her overacting was just too much. It kind of ruined that character for me. But anyway.
Some of those kids are very good actors, and some of them are terrible. I mean, Noah Schnapp, what's his name?
Schnaps, I think.
Not Schnaps, is it?
Schnapp.
Salute.
Singular.
But he is one of the worst actors I've seen in a show in recent years.
Like, I think that's a bit mean.
Most people are just fine, and they can get through it. Everyone else was, even Winona with her like ham-fisted like thing that she does, that she's always done in her career, was a million times more believable. Like she would say something and it would cut to him and he was just like acting bizarre. Like it was very strange. Also, did you notice, and I wanted to change the subject, but did you notice when they were all running across that desert scape, they didn't show Winona, they just showed her shoulder or the back of her.
With the axe on her shoulder.
Yeah, like for about 40 minutes, she wasn't properly on the screen. And I wonder if that was a body double. Like she was just like, look, I'm not, because that probably took like fucking 18 hours to film, like running across that desert from all different angles and them saying different things. She didn't say anything. And she wasn't on screen for most of that until right towards the end. They didn't show her. And I found that very interesting, an interesting choice. And I think it must have been because she didn't want to be there that day or couldn't be there that day to do that. But that violence, it's just got me, obviously, you can't ignore what goes on in the US with gun violence. And I thought it was an interesting choice for what you'd consider a somewhat progressive and inclusive show that tried to be politically minded, to have just such explicit gun violence as a solution.
This indiscriminate killing, and it is, I suppose, at heart, or through some readings, the show could be about good versus bad or good versus evil. But the indiscriminate killing of people who didn't adhere to the kids' ideology or the kids' needs or narratives, I found very troubling. Even people like whatever, Bald Eagle, whatever that character's name is.
What is his name?
I can't remember. When in that last episode, or the penultimate episode, where he blew up that helicopter with the people inside, and I just thought, there's no. Obviously, it works for the plot. It carries the plot forwards, but there's no remorse. There's no, at least from what we see, the characters have no moral compass when it comes to this indiscriminate killing of people. And yeah, that's really problematic, especially given the situation in the US.
And Winona chopping off Vecna's head with an axe, and
you fucked with the wrong family. I mean, that was a bit.
See, that to me is really problematic for many reasons, and framing it had to be the strong matriarch. It was just a little bit heavy-handed. But anyway, in the US, with the violence that goes on, I mean, obviously it's all over the news since we've been since we chatted last time, because it only happened a couple of days ago. But there were ICE agents in Minneapolis who were carrying out a rampage or a raid, or however they're framing it, and a civilian got caught in the middle of it and was shot dead by one of the ICE officers. And the framing of it by the right-wing media in the US is that she was an agitator and that she was a domestic terrorist, I think the politicians are calling her. It is so worrying to me that how normalized it has become in the US to settle things with violence, that somebody who is, even if she was protesting against ICE deportations or arrests,
which is not by any means a given, because
no, but it was also, in my mind, not even extreme to voice concern about that. It is so shocking that there are people with weapons that can go and shoot these people, and there seems to be, as far as I can tell up to now, no sort of like
accountability,
or like there's no trying to make it right, or no, not even any trying, like sort of dampening down the upset around it. It's just like, oh yeah, people are acting like she fucked around and she found out, you know?
Well, there's so many different angles, so many different things that are wrong with the situation. But even if you take the human side out of it for a second, which we can talk about, but even if you take that, to put that to one side, legally, I can't understand. Well, I suppose I can understand, because the law book just seems to have become completely irrelevant across the Atlantic. But the fact that the president and other senior politicians in the US government are openly saying things which could jeopardize a balanced, impartial inquiry. It's outrageous, but no one's outraged anymore, because it's just yet another flouting of norms and checks and balances that we think should exist and should be in place. But how can something like that happen, and the official response be, oh, she was an agitator, blah blah blah, rather than, this is a very serious incident and we're looking into it and a formal investigation will happen.
And then you tie that into everything else that's going on. Like, I follow Brian Krasenstein. Do you follow him on any social media?
I don't know who he is.
He is I don't know, he's a political commentator, and he's got quite a big following. Like, I mean, I know you don't use X, but he's one of the last big liberal or progressive accounts on X, and he's got nearly 1 million followers, and he's one of the only voices that hits back at all the right-wing propaganda on there. And he posted this thing, a clip of Trump implying that he's going to start bombing Mexico. We're going to start hitting land with regard to the cartels. The cartels are running Mexico. And with that, coupled with what's going on with Venezuela, coupled with ICE marauding around US cities and now shooting civilians, and also the people that they would be arresting are also civilians, like they're just going about their business. And
the rhetoric around Greenland and taking over Greenland, it's a stark reminder, isn't it, that the US is very much an imperialist nation, and it's maybe served the rest of the world's interests to try and ignore that for the last few decades. But it's with Dump at the helm, it's become so clear and obvious. But you think about places like Hawaii. Hawaii is part of the US. Alaska is part of the US. Like, I mean, and I don't know when Alaska became part of the US, but Hawaii was only in the middle of the 20th century. It wasn't it wasn't centuries ago by any stretch. Well, I suppose probably about 75 years ago now, but it wasn't. It's not. It's the US expansionism is not a new thing. It's maybe been simmering a bit on the back burner for the last few decades, but it's not. It's not by any stretch a new thing.
But like I've seen a few commentaries online in this vein where saying that when is the world going to ask 300 million US citizens to take responsibility for what's going on there, instead of us all just being horrified and saying, hey, your president and in ICE, that's terrible, and what's happening in Venezuela is terrible, and what's happening threats to Greenland is terrible. Like you and I agree should happen with the state of Israel and how people work to sanction or to use cultural or economic sanctions against Israel because of the genocide in Gaza. Should we collectively, as humanity, be trying to do something similar with the USA to try and force change or to make our voices heard or to stand up for disenfranchised or the people experiencing violence? Is that something that we could put pressure on the US population to make them act more?
I just don't think it's that simple. I think that the US is it's sort of at the pinnacle of I don't even have the vocabulary, and I'm going to blame my cold for the brain fog.
Sure, Sue, blame the cold.
But the US, I mean, the standard of living in the US is in some ways the best in the world.
Depends
it's
who you are.
Arguably not, but by many metrics, it's the best in the world based on the exploitation of other people and other nations. And I don't think most Americans want to change that necessarily. And I don't know what
So that's what I mean. Like if the pressure, like just like you would say that a lot of people in Israel have great lives, and so the motivation needs to come from taking away some of those privileges. And so should countries outside of the US sanction the US, just like they would with other countries who they don't want to develop nuclear weapons or participate in unjust wars? What if countries such as the UK or France or Spain or Australia sanctioned the US for threatening to invade Greenland or using threatening language against Mexico or kidnapping the president of another country or bombing civilians? So if we just even take out the domestic stuff like ICE, what if countries reacted accordingly like they might do to any other state on the planet who acts aggressively?
I think the problem with that is that the US is maybe the most powerful nation on the planet, and it's very dangerous and scary to go up against that. And I don't see how that would necessarily work. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I don't see how something like that could work unless there was 100% agreement across all other nations on the planet to have some sort of like cultural boycott or trade boycott or something like that. And I just don't think that's going to work in the globalized world that we live in now. I just don't think that's possible, sadly.
But I mean, people could hit US companies, and then the companies would in turn put the pressure on the government. That's how the US seems to work. It seems to be that corporations have so much sway with domestic and foreign policy that if everybody said, hey, we're never going to buy, I don't know, Coca-Cola, I'm assuming, as a US owned or predominantly US owned company, if no one on the planet is going to buy Coca-Cola until Coca-Cola stands up and denounces ICE or refuses to have any sort of financial ties to ICE or the military because of what they're doing to Venezuela or Mexico or Greenland. If you could get multiple large corporations to stop funding politicians and making donations to politicians who further these agendas, to stop supplying products or doing contracts with the army, the US military, maybe we could start seeing some change, because that's how these policies come into place in the first place, because people get paid to do them, like, or like there's insider trading, like people.
I don't even know if I'm not saying capitalism isn't the problem. But I don't think that's the only problem. I think there's an embedded cultural belief in the US that America, or the United States of America, is a superior nation. And even moderate Americans that you and I might know, although they might have more of a criticism of that they don't take it on face value and just drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Yeah.
I do think it's still embedded in their mentality and culturally, and across every facet of American culture, across education, workplace, nationalism, national identity. There is embedded this idea that the US is number one, and
yeah,
I just don't know if enough Americans would do that, and whether a global boycott of things outside of the US would be enough to change that mentality or change the systems that work to further that mentality.
Well, something's got to happen. Like what would we all do if the US invaded Greenland or started bombing Mexico? Would we just still think, oh, well, that's just the way the world order is? Like we can't do anything about that? Or would we try and individually take collective action to try and change something? What would it have to take for us to feel like we need to do something?
Would that stop that happening?
It might. I mean, people have tried before, like, with apartheid in South Africa. People boycotted lots of things politically and culturally and financially with South Africa, which I think obviously most of that success goes to activists and people in South Africa who fought for generations. But a lot of pressure came from international community, or Japanese whaling that was suspended for a while because people boycotted buying Japanese products, and it really affected the Japanese economy. And so I think it could, but it would, like you said, have to be a very, very intense and focused
but I also
global campaign.
Think that people like to support ideas like that, but they don't want to make personal sacrifices.
Well, it's like what everyone always says, like, why didn't people just stand up in force against the Nazis? Why didn't they all just get together and go, actually, because there was just enough scraps being handed to them, and they were not the ones being persecuted and shot in the street or gassed,
but
that they
also
thought they could just go on.
Also, I just think there's an element to human nature of not caring that much. That there's this performative outrage, but at the same time, people, if they're not affected in their immediate environment by it, they'll still keep drinking Coca-Cola. They'll still go to McDonald's. I mean, we talk about this, and we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, but in our personal lives as well when it comes to veganism. People might see the mistreatment of animals and think, oh, that's awful, but then keep eating meat and keep consuming dairy products. So I think that there's just an element of human nature which is just resistant and is actively resistant to acknowledging our roles in global politics and global movements, or I don't know if that's the right term, but yeah, I'm blaming the cold again.
Well, talking of veganism, I just read a blog post about that yesterday, saying that violence towards animals isn't just a side effect; it's the main point of, it's the main underpinning thing about the society that we live in: violence against animals, and veganism is dragging that violence out of the shadows and exposing it and then acting on that, right? It's like saying, hey, I'm not ignoring that anymore for my own benefit or my own comfort, so I'm going to not participate in those systems anymore to the best of my ability, right? But in a lot of other parts of our society, we still are able to compartmentalize, like you said, like what goes on in the US or what the US is doing to Venezuela or Israel and Gaza. A lot of people, the majority of people, just know that it's going on in the back of the mind, but they're able to just keep it there and not drag it into the light. It's still in the shadows. And that needs to change. And I mean, with veganism, one of the things that's been quite, I suppose, a successful campaign is Veganuary, which is very timely because we are in January. And Veganuary is a campaign to try and encourage people to try veganism in the month of January. And it started in 2014. And I think it's been a highly effective, every year it signs up hundreds of thousands of people. And some of them do stay vegan. Some of them just try it for a month. Some of them cut down on their animal consumption after Veganuary. But what do you think about Veganuary as a form of, I suppose, activism or campaigning?
I think that I am probably one of the worst ambassadors for veganism, because for me, it's such a clear and obvious choice to make that I've I'm just, when I see people who know the horrors of what happens with animals and don't choose to avoid consuming animal products, I just think, well, it flabbergasts me. I can't get my head around that. And so while I can look at it objectively and recognize the good that Veganuary does in getting people to try veganism, even if only a fraction of those people stay vegan, I feel like saying to people, if you can't fucking see it in the first place, you're a fucking idiot, which I know is probably the
That's
worst
not
kind of
very,
No,
yeah.
I know.
And also, it doesn't
That's
make
what I mean.
sense because you weren't always vegan. So
No,
that
I know.
doesn't make sense.
But as
Also,
soon as I discovered the animal abuse that goes on to create meat and dairy products, I stopped consuming them. But that's what I
then,
mean. And
there are other things in your life where you
yeah,
might not give the
I
same, afford the same consideration to.
100%. I recognize the hypocrisy in it. Like, I try not to buy clothes made in sweatshops, but I don't do that exclusively.
Yeah.
And I try not to fly long haul. I try not to fly short haul. I try and reduce my flights, but I don't stop flying completely. There are many things that we could do in our lives that we don't necessarily do, and I recognize that for some people that's consuming animal products. But
So do you think? So do you not think Veganuary is an effective or useful campaign then?
No, I can see. That's what I mean. Objectively, I can look at it and say, yeah, you know what, it's and maybe that's the approach people could take with the US, rather than say, oh, there's a global boycott. It could be more like, oh, for the month of July, we're boycott. Maybe making it seem more manageable, more bite-sized sort of chunks, is the best approach to take.
Yeah, well, that's an idea I had a few years ago when I thought of trying to start a global sanctions campaign against the US single-handedly. No delusions of grandeur here, but I was thinking that if the movement picked one US owned corporation a month and targeted that corporation, and the global sanction and boycott against that corporation would end early if the CEO came out and signed an agreement to say, we won't support or do contracts with the US government, right? And then the next month, move on to someone else. And if after that month, that corporation or CEO didn't agree, that people would then be free to continue a rolling sanction or rolling boycott, but the focus of the campaign would move on to a different one each month, and to try and accumulate brands and corporations that were more on the side of not supporting the US military or military complex.
Yeah, I see the benefits to that strategy in one sense from a consumer perspective, that people might feel like, oh, I'm able to not buy my Starbucks for a month. But then a month goes by, maybe the CEO comes out and says, fine, whatever. And then people do buy Starbucks again, and it's like, well, what has that achieved? And
well, something's got to happen. I mean, we can't go on and then not be answerable to how humanity is treating each other. Like, do you still avoid products that you know are associated with the IDF if you know about it?
If I know about it, yeah.
Right. So isn't that the same thing? What difference does it make? Like, why do you do that? But you wouldn't apply the same thing to a corporation that was profiting from the US military.
Yeah, I think because it's easier to avoid brands that support the IDF, whereas to have a boycott of American products, for example. I mean, I'm going to America in October.
Yeah.
Anna and I have been planning for our 50th. We've been planning for years now to go to Dollywood in October. And of course, we've discussed the problematic nature of that. But, I have family, I have my brother, my nieces, I have loads of friends in the States, and it's.
But I mean, that's a different thing to say. If Dolly Parton came out and said, anyone who's an ICE officer can come to Dollywood for free for the rest of their lives, you probably wouldn't go to Dollywood, right?
That probably
so that's what I'm saying.
Breaker.
Not like a blanket ban or like boycotting an entire cultural landscape, but making choices to pinpoint, like what happened with the South African apartheid, or like things like that, where you and what's happening with Israel and the IDF, like a group of people collectively look for the biggest offenders, and then there is direct action taken against those entities and corporations, and to try and enact change. It's not punitive, it's to try and get them to sway the actual outcomes and the actions of the government and the
But I think
army.
that the playbook has changed, and with someone like Trump in the White House, he doesn't care if the CEO of Starbucks or McDonald's or whichever company you wanted to nominate went to Trump and said, look, this is really hurting us, what can we do? I don't think Trump's going to give a shit.
I know, but the thing is, Trump will be dead one day, and probably, within the next few years, and somebody else will come in who won't be the same as Trump. And we need to make sure that the pressure is on these people, whether that's in the US, Australia, or the UK, or Israel, anywhere around the world, that they are doing things that are inclusive and kind to people and not the opposite. And so that pressure should never end. Just because Trump is out or dies, that pressure should be on Marco Rubio or JD Vance or whatever nitwit comes in next. That pressure should stay up. And if they start edging towards that sort of fascist militarism more and more, that pressure should be on to drag them back to the center, as close to the center as we can. But anyway, yes, it's a very big job.
Just quickly to go back to Veganuary, though, the other sort of criticism I have of it, and again, overall I support the movement and the idea of it, but the other criticism I have of it, or the reservation I have around it, is that because it's in January, it does tie in very closely to these New Year's resolutions. And so I do think, to some extent, it trades on the idea of veganism being healthy, which I have a real problem with. I think for me, veganism is all about animals and animal rights. I don't avoid animal products for my benefit. I avoid animal products for the animal's benefit. And I do think that Veganuary, because it happens in January, people think, oh, I'm going to go vegan in January as a new year, new me, healthy eating, blah, blah, blah. And I do think that's a bit of a dangerous narrative to put out into the world. And so I'm a bit cautious about that, even though I can see that, maybe if, 100 people go vegan in January and only 10 of them stay vegan, and if 5 of them are doing it for health reasons, yeah, that's still got a net benefit. But I do think it does muddy the waters slightly, and I am concerned about that.
Well, all of your concerns are legitimate and we hear them. So thank you for sharing them. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us for another episode. And if you want to, you can subscribe, you can comment, ask us questions, give us feedback, tell us where we've gone wrong, because we actually do a lot of the time go wrong. We get facts
wrong. Speak for yourself, Sue.
And we'll be back again with another episode next week. And you can come along to our queer open mic at the end of the month at the Cock Tavern. And if you go to fatgayvegan.com, you go to the events page and see what other events I've got coming up. Anything else you want to say, Josh?
No, that's it. I'm going to crawl back into bed now and have another lem sip in a couple of hours. But thank you for joining us, and we'll be back in your feeds this time next week.
And a big hello to everyone in Montauk.
Bye, folks.
Bye.